Welcome to the Private Equity Experience Podcast, your backstage pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets that drive value in the PE universe. No filters, no fluff, just straight talk and expert insights to help you navigate the private equity world with confidence. And now your hosts, Ed Barton, Rory Liebhart, and Emily Sander.
All right, we have another trending topic episode. So we've come across a whole bunch of articles, but here's one. Big Ten is letting the wolf in the door and selling its soul? For what? The bizarre and brazen story of the Big Ten trying to financially fleece itself. So
If that's not clickbait, I don't know what is.
we're talking about PE in college athletics, which is something I never thought I'd hear, but apparently this is like an actual thing being considered.
Yeah, it has been. It's really been, it's kind of coming to the forefront over the last couple of years as college athletics, specifically football and basketball, have really turned a paradigm to where players are now being paid through name, image, and likeness collectives. There's revenue sharing from universities to players now. And there's basically a ton of cash moving around in ways that it hasn't before. So when one needs cash, there's places to find that cash, and so yes, private equity is now being talked about as a means to grow college sports in ways that we've never seen before, which is really interesting.
And this is different from like the transfer portal and NIL and like paying college.
It's all related.
It's all related. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I would say if not for those things becoming real in ways that are actually legal now, when people were still doing the same shit when it was illegal. Let's be clear about that. Now it's overt, and now it's it's a time for other private investors to get involved. Really, private equity is at the top of the list.
So how does this work? Like what entity are they investing in?
Well, that's, I think, what is much of a discussion topic. I don't think anything is being fully established, right? Like, I have so many questions. I have more questions than answers. Let's put it that way. I mean, a lot of universities are public institutions. Some are private. How would you distinguish, somebody wanting to invest in the football program of a school, but not the, women's field hockey, right? Like, things like that come to mind. How do we treat players as employees? I mean, you can look to professional sports franchises and kind of see a model happening there. Mm-hmm. But it's just so crazy for me. I mean, I'm a college football guy. I grow up with the romanticism about student athletes and, it being a pivotal thing. And it's like, I've seen it change so much over the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm like clinging to this notion of what is no longer there, And I mean, I've personally turned off from pro sports in a lot of ways because I put all my energy into college football and things like that. But so it's like seeing this happen is really wild, but it also opens up, discussion of like, well, what could change? How could it be? So.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Ed saying in an earlier conversation on or off air, I can't remember, but that some college students took a pay cut when they went to the pros.
Right. Yeah. They took a pay cut when they got drafted.
Yep.
Wow.
And this is a situation where, you're like, how's PE going to do this? And my response is generally where there's any cash flow, especially a time valued cash flow, where you've got the ability to discount that cash flow and it's monthly recurring revenue or it's annual recurring revenue, which is set by TV contracts and the NIL contracts, and you can apply a risk premium to it. You're going to be able to then discount it back to where the PE guys are going to be happy. Yeah. And the college is happy. So here's an example of something I think you may see. You may see a university, and I'll use one of my myriad of universities. So you may see a university like the University of Notre Dame decide to go
big brand.
Biggest
brand probably.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to sell the rights of our next 10 years worth of college football television to a private equity firm for an upfront payment of $2.8 billion.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then Notre Dame, because Notre Dame does, I mean, when I was there, we got the exclusive
Oh yeah,
with NBC.
Every Saturday morning, dude.
We got the exclusive with NBC, and so
Yep.
we were the Notre Dame Broadcasting Network, or Notre Dame Broadcasting
truly.
Corporation was NBC, and so they do that, and then the PE guys go, okay, here's what we can do. We're going to negotiate a better deal or a harder core deal for the television rights. So we're going to get $3.8 billion for the television rights. The other thing that I saw in some of the articles are the college athletic directors tend to be attorneys, or have come up through the college athletics environment. And so, they're talking about like the negotiation of some of these contracts has been, how do people make millions of dollars and continue to fail year after year after year after year?
And
so the private equity folks
question.
are likely to come in and bring things like, complex analytic models to coaching to go, okay, this coach is, what correlations at a coordinator level or at a small college level work well to bring in at somebody at a higher level. So, and then if the guy's not performing, boot them out and get someone in, and they're going to negotiate harder contracts with the talent. So it turns into a pro league essentially that's
big time.
That's under the brand of a college.
Yeah.
So you're selling the TV rights, but the product is still the game and how good the game is and how winning the team is?
Boy, I'd say winning helps certainly, and sort of having a successful program helps. However, you have all sorts of value centers in a college program, similar to like a NFL program or Major League Soccer, not Major League Soccer as much, but just like Premier League stuff, like think global. But like the branding around the individual players, which now is even more prevalent now that you can actually pay players for that. You have merchandising rights, you have concessions rights, you have freaking real estate on which your stadium's built. You have all of these elements that add value to the experience. And so at the end of the day, it's a consumer product, just like other sports are. And so however you monetize and follow those models from a private equity standpoint will apply here. I think it's kind of to what Ed alluded to. I see like, why would a private equity want to get involved? It's kind of a new frontier for them to get involved. There hasn't previously been a ton of above board capital flowing into the programs. Two, it's probably ripe for efficiency gains from a managerial and oversight perspective. Again, not always the case, but in a lot of instances, private institutions are not run like an enterprise. They're run like a taxpayer funded institution. So you don't have as much innovation, things like that. I'm sort of painting a picture of generality. It's not always the case, but like all of these things are saying, hey, we can come in here and do this better than it's been done. We can wring some efficiencies out, make it more profitable, and then become more successful, and then sell the enterprise down the road, to other institutions. It's really an interesting time to be seeing this unfold, literally.
Yeah.
I think the bigger difference here is going to be there is no equity essentially in the core product. So you've got things that you can put equity-like structures around it. So it could be stadium rentals, those kind of things. But what you do have in college athletics, and again, let me be clear, it's men's basketball, men's football. Everything else is a loss at college generally. What you do have is fairly predictable, especially when you're talking like the top 40 schools, fairly predictable cash flows in both of those sports, and cash flows that can be monetized for present value. And then the university can use that money for other program. So that's their position is, look, if I can get $1.5 billion or $2 billion now versus $2.8 billion over the next 5 years, I'll take the $2 billion now so I can build new dormitories, or so I can hire a new X, or so I can do new Y. And then the PE guys are able to take on something, a different approach with respect to the cash flow. So I think what we're more likely to see is like a television setup where they go, look, we're going to buy the exclusive negotiating rights and cash flows from your television for the next 10 years. When that contract is coming up, it's going to be an extension, or another private equity firm is going to come in and try and negotiate a deal to get that same option or same negotiating right.
And then how wild is it to think about M&A in the space too, right? Like as far as combining things like conferences, which we've already seen happening, but in a way that's much more structured and sort of like PE model. Like how could you think about like rolling up a bunch of sub conferences into another power conference, right?
Well,
like
your one model that I would think is logical, because it's already on the college football side, has already been kind of permeated by corporate sponsorship, is the playoffs bowl game.
Absolutely
elements.
right.
So you look at March Madness, for instance.
Yeah,
that has not been largely, but you start getting corporate sponsors for each of those games, and then you start getting, some of those elements are played at neutral sites, but those neutral sites could very well be, corporate owned facilities that have X, Y, or Z type of ticket sales and other things. I think there's a myriad of potential opportunities here where private equity can insert themselves, whether that's in the playoff area, where again, I think at that point do have a potential equity, new venture play. Because right now the NCAA kind of runs the runs the tourney, and they might just want the cash. And then on the other side, the college football bowl games are really owned by the corporate sponsors at this point.
They are, bowl and the like all of these bowl games, like they are their own brands. They truly are, and they bring brand recognition.
Yeah, the BlackRock Opportunity Fund Bowl.
Evergreen Fund too. Like, exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So Ed, you threw out some like financial terms, and you kind of explained them along the way, but present value, meaning I'd rather have the money now so I can invest it earlier.
Money now is worth more than money over time or money later, because it's in your pocket. And so there's a value that has.
You put it to use right now, and you have it like in hand versus.
So you remove credit risk, and you remove kind of any of the other non-systematic risks that can't be diversified or hedged away.
Right.
And then there was like the one you mentioned earlier, which is the delayed or like time value.
Time value of money is essentially the same thing, which is the present value of the money is the time value. Money has a time value. Time has a money value. That was taught to me by the late Professor Paul Conway back in 1990. And the thought process there is money today is worth more than money tomorrow. And so you should be compensated, or you should pay to get the money faster. And that's the time value of money. That's the present value of the money. So $100 next year is worth about $96 today. On the other side, all your time has a money value. So you shouldn't get your time away without looking at, what am I being compensated for taking this risk?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying in this, what we're talking about, this topic, the schools would rather have the money now.
Yeah.
That they can, like you said, go invest in a dorm or go invest in like top professors or whatever. And then it's interesting, the players in this whole PE jigsaw puzzle are like now like TV rights and corporate sponsors.
They are the product. I mean, and they always have been, I would argue. And I think that's the main argument for some of the sea changes we've seen in the NCAA. But it does raise questions like how much can you hold these players accountable to the success or not of the business plan of the squad, right? Like, so, any employees that, are managed in a private company can be fired and hired at will effectively. So, think again about like we have 18 to 20-year-olds mostly in the college football arena. Same with basketball.
Let's give them more attention and more pressure and more money.
Right.
And see how that
What
goes.
kind of incentives are there? Like, like they don't even, it's such a formative years for someone to grow. I mean, but it is capitalism. So you can choose to be part of it or not. Right. So, but it would be very interesting to see how much we kind of move towards players becoming true employees, collective bargaining, all of the stuff that, pro franchises deal with now. But those kids are a little bit older at that point.
Is this like at the conference level or the school by school level or TBD?
I think it starts at the power conference level. So, I mean, I'm much more knowledgeable of college football than basketball, but generally right now you have 4 power conferences with really 2 super conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC. We should be saying all these words a lot because it'll get picked up in the algorithm and like get out to less people. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and the ACC. So those are effectively the 4 conferences that have the power schools. The one caveat to that is you got a couple of independents, with Notre Dame being the most notable one, which is, or again, as I say,
they are not in a conference.
They are not in the conference by their own choice. And that's worked out extremely well for them, for that school and that program. But point being is all of the legislation in college athletics is built around that, around those conferences. So it starts there, but within that you have schools competing for value within the conferences, and you have these conferences that the conferences are what make a ton of money right now from the broadcasting rights, the media rights, all that stuff, predominantly, at which point they share that revenue with the universities. And within those caste systems, if you will, you know, the bigger schools get a higher share than the lower schools or the newer schools to the conference. But so there's a lot to be done and unlocked there, so to speak. But yeah, I think that's how it'll be. I think it's kind of set up right now in the way that it would kind of be taken forward. So there'd be investments, as we've seen in these articles recently, as today, directly into the Big Ten or some of these other conferences. And from there, you know, how the schools negotiate with the conferences is another thing, because maybe the conferences start kicking schools out and stuff like that. And where I think a lot of money is to be made is the lawyers in all of this, because you're setting new policy and you're going to be litigating the shit out of stuff when stuff really starts happening. So, you know, really, really interesting. But it's like, again, we were talking off air. If you would have told me this would have happened 5 years ago, I would have like thought, no way. Like, this is the one last bastion of like, you know, kind of like
Norman Rockwell,
right? You know, and then like, nope. And it's not as if I think it was actually more the schools and the conferences that have made these big changes available for private equity to come in. It wasn't like private equity is like spearheading this per se. I think that, you know, it's just a natural place for investment, institutional investment, to go. And they're at the top of the food pyramid on that, you know?
Who does this displace or like ruffle feathers of? Like, I'm imagining, I know in the SEC there's like some big donors.
I think fans that cling to some level of as we just said, like the sort of classic notion. One, you know, a little bit of a tangent, if I may. Like, one thing that I've been thinking about on this front is like, there are a lot of college fans. I'm kind of one of those. It's like, I like it because of what it represents nostalgia wise to me and all this stuff, that, you know, if it becomes the NFL, does this cannibalize the NFL or the other way around? It's like, maybe people are just going to like gravitate more towards the NFL because maybe they just don't have the bandwidth for all of it, taking up an entire Saturday and an entire Sunday. I pretty much have my Saturdays taken up, but I have my Sundays free. But it is interesting to say, okay, there's only so many eyeballs that are into football. You know, is it going to grow the game, or is it going to, you know, kind of drop some eyeballs or move eyeballs from one to the other? Because how much capacity do you have to follow all of your favorite NFL teams and all of your favorite college teams and stuff like that? I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that do all of it, but like, I'm just saying, I just wonder if it doesn't alienate the customer at the end of the day, and the customer is the consumer of the product, right? So
I was going to say, I think that's well said, Rory. I you know, speaking for myself, it used to be you had very few transfers and you had to wait a year to transfer in college to play. Yeah. And so you had a lot more stability. You always had 25% of the team or so turning over every year, but you had a lot more stability in the players. Mm-hmm. And the coaches tended to be a lot longer fuse on coach, you know, kind of hire a coach and they last for a while. Yeah. And, you know, what we've seen already is with the transfer portal and the NIL money and those things, people going, look, I'm going to transfer because I can get more money here and I can get more playing time there. And, you know, again, that for me has actually taken the college football piece and made it feel like the NFL. And I'm like, look, and I'm with you. I'm like, look, if I actually see more stability with the Seahawks than I see with Syracuse University. And so I'm like, I you know, if I got to pick one or the other, I'm going to pick the local NFL team, because at least they're not pretending to be a not-for-profit,
Right.
enterprise that's educationally driven.
Yeah.
Would there ever be like these college teams are doing the money play and the PE and NIL, and these college teams are just not? It's like
There
a normal.
already is a lot of that.
It's already that way. That's a good
Okay.
question. Yeah.
And so like we talked earlier, Notre Dame in 1988 basically negotiated its own TV agreement with NBC exclusive,
Wow.
and has had that for, I mean, we're looking like nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
And so they they said, look, we can draw all these eyeballs. We're going to negotiate our own deal. We're not going through the NCAA.
Mm-hmm.
And that was almost the start of it. And then the conferences have always been kind of aggressive on the element. And then it was a revenue share at the conference level.
Yeah.
But you have schools like the Mountain West or conferences like the Mountain West. It's a have-not conference. And when you compare that to the SEC, it's a real have-not conference. And they are now having trouble competing. They can't.
Even the Pac-12 became a non-conference, basically.
Non-conference, yeah.
I mean, that was a Power 5 conference, and it got displaced. They're like,
you really can't get. But those schools can't compete because now you're buying talent.
Yeah.
And so you can't. Boise State is going to have trouble competing against an Alabama, where 10 years ago Boise State would compete for the national championship.
Well, that's the true farm system now, if you will, like the lower group of 5 conference. Again, we're talking football, and probably the same in basketball, but like, these lower conferences, they are basically now with the ability to transfer, as Ed said, without having to wait a year on your eligibility and make more money. It's like these rosters are getting perpetually plucked. And, if a player is like not a great high school player per se, 5-star, 4-star, they go play it like Utah State or, pick any number of them, like James Madison, although they're kicking some ass this year. But point being is like they'll play well and they'll be like, oh, it's like another farm system in baseball. So you then move to a higher school after you've been recruited and played at this lower school. And so it's kind of perpetually being a feeder system. So you think about the lack of consistency of rosters in the power conference, that's magnified times 10 in these lower conferences, because you can't even keep anybody if you got a star player or a coach for that matter. So
and private equity is just going to exacerbate the problem by putting more money into the system to be able to pluck those players and putting in the discipline of the analytics, the kind of the pieces. They'll put Moneyball to play
for sure
in college athletics, more so than it already is.
Yeah.
Would this ever move to the NFL?
Well, it's already there, I believe, and certainly in baseball too. Like there are private funds that are invested in franchises to some degree. Maybe not the majority stake, but certainly minority stakes.
I know the Packers, didn't they go public? So like the
Packers have been public since like 1920.
Packers, that's definitely an exception.
They're publicly owned, but and the Celtics used to be publicly owned as well, and they went private. But you have a number of, like the NFL, for instance, basically has a very rigorous methodology by which they vet ownership.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to be an NFL majority owner, and they make enough money that they may not. But what you do see is they are ruthless. They've been ruthless business people since the beginning, basically since the Roselle era and the combination of the AFL, NFL, and they're making good money. But anywhere there's money, there's an opportunity for private equity to figure out how to, if there's money and inefficiency, private equity will find a way to get themselves in there. And it could be on the operational side. It could be on stadium construction. It could be any of those things.
Yeah. Well, and we talked a couple pods ago about EA Sports and Saudi wealth fund. I mean, so, sovereign wealth funds are very prevalent as investors globally outside of the U.S. So in football clubs, English football clubs or European football clubs, there's a lot of investment from, sovereign wealth funds and other big funds like that. So it's definitely not novel. Ed made a good point about there's maybe a more vetting process. It's not just a free market in the U.S., but I don't see why that will stay the case forever if there's more money to be made.
Level though, at like the university level, worldwide.
Not that I'm aware of. No. This is
we have a
strictly US
fairly
phenomenon
unique,
right now.
we have a fairly unique college sports.
Yeah.
I mean, you have college sports everywhere, almost everywhere, but it is not like the US.
Yeah. It makes America great, in my opinion.
If this goes through, who are the winners and losers? Like, are there sponsors or donors to these big SEC teams that like lose sway? Is that a loser, or do they find a way to plug themselves in?
The winner,
I
I
don't
think
think so.
ultimately you're going to have two big winners. I think big winner number one is going to be the student athlete, because you're going to continue to pump money in. I think talent, it's going to be talent acquisition. So it's going to start looking more and more like Hollywood and less like college athletics. So it's going to be, the student athlete is going to have the ability to get paid more. The private equity folks are going to be able to structure NIL deals with, other companies to get the preferred folks paid more.
Yeah.
And so I think the college athlete will ultimately benefit. So the talent will benefit. And I think private equity will benefit. Yeah. I think they rarely go into something where they don't benefit, so they'll structure it in such a way that they take advantage of those areas where there's inefficiencies to be had, where they can participate fully. And, whether that's stadium construction or any of those kind of things, they'll do well. Who's going to suffer, I think, ultimately is going to be the fan, who is going to be kind of faced with a magnification or intensification of what we've already seen with, schools moving around and working for better deals, and players moving around looking for better deals, and coaches. And then the other one that I think is going to lose ultimately is going to be the institution, who used to be able to, and the conferences. So the traditional college infrastructure around sports, where they used to be able to do two things. One, these two sports, men's basketball, men's football, would subsidize all the other sports. So that money would all come into the university, and that would be used to subsidize women's water polo and men's track and field. And now that's not going to happen. And then, because that money is going to be off to athletes and private equity. And the college itself, I think, is going to struggle with a lot of folks. And again, Rory is a UW grad. I'm a grad of multiple institutions with college football programs. And we tend to have a strong emotional connection with our alma mater through that sports program. And if that sports program kind of begins to feel too businessy, that emotional connection will start to fray. And folks coming up through the system won't build that same loyalty to the alma mater that we did growing up. And I think that's going to be the fundamental difference. That's where
ultimately the consumer might suffer, but we'll see, how durable that is over time, like who knows what kind of additional innovations. I mean, I'm already thinking to myself, like, changing the rules to grant even more eligibility to these folks so that they stay in the system and they don't go to the NFL, because maybe they don't have as much incentive because they're making more money in college. That's actually already happening that way, but this would be an even much greater potential for that if you have governing bodies changing. The NCAA is already somewhat impotent, if you will, in so many ways, and it's going to probably become even more so over time if more private interests get involved. So, we'll see. But it is here. I mean, it's happening. It's definitely not a theoretical at this point. Whereas, like I said, 5 years ago, I would have thought it would be like, no way. But where there's a will, there's a way.
Predictions. Will this happen? How soon?
Yeah.
What will the result be?
Yeah. I mean, doubling on a couple of our episodes. I mean, like, let's call it 18 to 24 months from now, when we can invest in private equity out of our 401k as retail investors, like we can have exposure to this asset class on our own, So it's happening. And
it will happen
years, for sure.
Yeah, it will happen. I think it'll
so much
happen.
Money in this business. It's going to happen.
I think it'll happen sooner than 24 months.
I think it's as big, if not bigger, than the NFL, quite honestly. You just have simply more programs.
Yep. I think it'll happen. It'll happen within the next year. I think you'll see the first investments. And it's funny.
They'll be in the conferences. They'll be like directly partnerships with the conferences for sure.
And they're already in the bowl games. And I'll bet you the NCAA March Madness becomes one of the early
that's
dominoes to
good.
fall. I think the other piece, I was just thinking about the losers. My old law firm in Syracuse had a significant NCAA practice, working through the eligibility issues, and whether folks were on probation and dealing with some of the issues for enforcement from the NC2A. They're going to be a loser because there's going to be a lot less of that, because it's, as Rory noted, it's always been there. And so they would hire our firm to kind of clean up a lot of this stuff. Well, now it's all in the open, and it's
a
fine.
hated institution. Let's be real about that.
They're probably struggling now because they used to represent the colleges against the NC2A on violations. And so there's probably fewer violations. And so the lawyers are going to, Rory had talked about the lawyers are going to get busy. Well, that particular firm's lawyers are going to struggle a little bit because they're going to be fewer violations for them to defend.
Good point. Yeah. Point.
All right. That's our trending topic for private equity experience. And we will probably follow up with this one as well in 18 to 24 months and replay our predictions and see how they roll out.
Yep.
But
go Dogs.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Em.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.